Okay. Oops.
Is it me or is that really hard to read?
It's hard to read.
Okay, because I can't read it.
I can't either. I have old eyes.
So you kind of yell at her. Thank you.
Hold on, sorry. I got my mouse. Oops. Oh, good grief.
Okay, that's a lot better. Now I have to eat it the size of my head. It's in front of me. I know you. Welcome. Can you hear me? Good, thank you. Sorry, we're running late. I already said that. We just finished another meeting. We're gonna have maybe some technical challenges today, but we'll work through them. We also have a couple folks who are not going to be able to be here. Mac Lynn had to step in for Director Strickler, who was out sick today at an event, I think in Eugene. And Amanda is joining us soon.
I believe so. Thanks for wrapping up.
Yeah, we just finished another meeting that she was directing. So today we're going to start with Erica McAlpine, who's our new Assistant Director for Social Equity. She's going to walk us through where things are with that and who's, you know, what she's been doing since she transitioned into this job and kind of the vision going forward. And then we're going to hear a presentation from Mike Woodford, who is our new data officer, and first time I met you is today, so nice to meet you. And going to hear from him in terms of his vision and what his goals are, and working with the agency to help us improve our data analysis and information. So calendar review, we have one meeting left in December, which is kind of a review of the year and planning for next year. And we'll probably do this as a hybrid meeting because, no, or completely remote. I won't be here, and it might be kind of a short meeting because it's really just a recap and planning for next year. So we'll do that remotely, and we can also at that time think about bring your calendars for next year and talk about, well, you know, when we want to meet and those details. So Cooper, maybe back to you.
Okay, great, thanks. I guess the only thing I would add, just for everyone's awareness, I think most folks on the call are tracking, but I'm leaving ODOT here over the next few weeks, probably towards the end of the year will be my kind of transition point. So I'll likely be here for the next meeting, but I want folks to be aware of that transition. We're going to be talking through kind of with the executive kind of leadership team, and then with our chair here, you know, what the transition looks like. But I think it should be pretty seamless. And my guess is probably whoever steps into my role will continue to assume or participate. But we also have obviously the other members of ODOT who are participating in this. But we need to have a little bit of conversation, I think, with the chair on that point. I just wanted folks to be aware of that transition that's happening. It's been a real pleasure working with this group and with all of you, and really just personally appreciated the partnership and all the great conversations. And I know it's going to be a continued useful, really useful body for this organization. So thank you on a personal level for what y'all provided, and look forward to working with you for a little bit longer. But I want to make sure folks are tracking that.
And I just wanted to say thank you, Cooper. You have really helped us kind of reinvigorate this committee, and I give you a lot of the credit for that. I appreciate all your. Sorry to see you go.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly it's taken, it's the middle of it. We got a great team doing this. Thank you.
Where can it?
Not 100% sure. So yeah. Well, with that, maybe we jump into should we jump in?
Yes.
Eric, I believe you're up and we're gonna figure out how to transition you, although Sabrina, I think we need to transition to Eric.
Yep. Go ahead.
Can you all hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So, first of all, I just want to petition Cooper to stay with us here at ODOT. I ask him every time I see him, maybe one of these times it will work. He and I have the Alabama connection. So if he leaves, I don't know who I will mess with about football. So today I'm Erica McAlpin, the new Assistant Director for Social Equity. And I've been at ODOT since June 15th. And since then, I've had an opportunity to talk with a lot of employees and leaders and community members as it relates to what is social equity and what does the Office of Social Equity do. So I thought, that's a problem, right? If people don't know who we are, what we do, and why we exist here at ODOT. And so my vision for the Office of Social Equity, which has been in existence for about 2.5 years now, is to do a comprehensive training program. And you'll see that in the outline that in the letter that I provided. But I'll just start first with what was already happening before I got here. So the strategic action plan drives a lot of the work that we do. And one thing we focused on was equity and engagement. So how do we engage with stakeholders and community members that are invested in ODOT projects and all the work that happens within the agency? And so we created an equitable engagement guide or toolkit to assist us in making sure that we have all voices at the table when we do engagement with communities. We also developed the equitable engagement compensation policy and program, in which we compensate community members for their time when they give it in service to ODOT. And so those both are programs that have already launched within the agency, and we are working to scale those up so that the equitable engagement guide will be the standard for engagement across the agency, and that the EECP is used as often as possible with people in the community when they provide their time to us. We're also working on embedding equity into policies and processes at ODOT. And because equity is centered on achieving fairness in outcomes, the why, what, and how we get to those outcomes are all critical to ensuring that we effectively address equity in all aspects of our work. And so the scope of work includes all policies, processes, and procedures, current and future ones, and we will be focusing on the processes that contribute to our priority areas, which is the workforce and the communities we serve, as well as creating economic opportunities and identifying policies and procedures as outputs to that process. So ODOT has over 90 policies that have an impact on ODOT employees and the public. This doesn't include all of the procedures and processes within the business lines and the programs that guide everyday operations. We currently have an opportunity to review all of our processes and policies and apply an equity lens. We're doing that for a few reasons. First, it's never been done before, and many of our policies are outdated and in need of this sort of strategic review. Second, the viewpoint will help us see where policies that seem to be beneficial are actually creating or worsening burdens, and will allow us to prioritize equity at the root of how we approach our work. So right now we are doing some initial scoping with areas around the agency to help us determine the full breadth of our scope. And we are developing a communications plan and a plan for launching this effort in the agency. So we expect to get started with that work next year. And we'll be launching task forces that will work through 2024. And it's important to keep in mind that this work is a marathon, not a sprint. It won't be done quickly, but we will make sure that it gets done because we need to focus on that. We're also working on economic equity. And what that means is working to provide economic opportunities for our Black, Indigenous, and people of color owned businesses, as well as women owned firms, and those firms that are in disadvantaged population portions of the state. We've also established community workforce agreements, and we're working to strengthen our external engagement, which I talked about when I started initially. The Office of Civil Rights is also a part of my portfolio, and I am so proud to report that this year we met our DBE goal, and we came in at 15.37%. We do have a higher goal that's effective October 1st of 23.43%. But right now we are celebrating that victory of reaching the DBE goal for this year. And we've also launched a DBE advisory committee, which is made up of DBEs and other stakeholders in the community, as well as some ODOT representatives. And they provide advice to our Office of Civil Rights on the barriers that DBEs face in doing business with ODOT. We have also been working on the Second Chance Citizens Initiative, which will happen as a result of the IIJA initiative, which is granting opportunities to people that are in prison, so that when they come out, they will, have a trade then and hopefully be able to, come and work for the agency or in the construction industry. And so we're also working on new non-discrimination policy postings that will be posted on our job sites, so that people will know that it's a harassment-free and discrimination-free environment. So with that update, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Yes, Ms. Hammond.
Thanks. And I tried to get my mute button off quick enough to mention to Cooper that I thought our committee should have voted whether or not we'd let him leave ODOT. And so I'm disappointed we didn't get to take that vote. We're going to miss you. But I also wanted to commend ODOT. I teach AASHTO Leadership Series courses for the 50 state DOTs. And one of our sessions that I teach is the equity, inclusion, and diversity section. And I asked Cooper if I could use the video that ODOT created on the congestion pricing program on the equity task force, which was just really a nicely done video that summarizes why all of us are having this conversation and talks about the impacts, as you know, of how our previous investments have done harm to communities. So I just want to thank you again, Cooper, for letting me use that, but let you know that you've hit the national stage, and every state DOT is watching this video now as we train their managers and emerging leaders.
That's great. Thank you.
I would entertain a motion to prohibit Cooper from leaving ODOT.
I'll second that.
I
So you mentioned, first of all, Erica, thank you so much for the presentation. That was really wonderful. I'm so happy that you are at ODOT and clearly running full speed in this marathon. And my name is Shauna Brownstein, and I work at Tesla. I used to work at Portland General Electric. They kept me on even though I'm at Tesla now. You mentioned equity in engagement And I'm really interested in how ODOT, in the work you guys have done there, and then how that can be used by other state agencies, because so many agencies do public engagement and need to do a better job at reaching all the communities that they serve.
Right. So we have a framework that's developed, and we're happy to guide other agencies through our process to show what we're doing in that space. But mainly the most recent examples that we have of the engagement toolkit being used is with the COAC and the HAB, which are two committees that have been formed around the Rose Quarter project. And the Office of Urban Mobility is really using the engagement toolkit and the equitable compensation plan in order to compensate those members of those committees. And so the two are working hand in hand to make sure that we are hearing from voices that were not previously allowed at the table, as well as other stakeholders that are interested in the project, and making sure that their feedback is heard and applied. So it's really being used in a small scale right now, but again, we hope to scale it up, and I'm sure as we do, other agencies will hear about it.
Yeah, and I feel like I beg this from every meeting that I come to. I really want ODOT to feel empowered to reach out to your sister agencies and share all of the work you're doing, because so much of the work you're doing overlaps with like Oregon Department of Energy or DEQ or land use and planning. Like, so thinking about how to partner and save resources across other agencies can be really beneficial. And also, as I'm sure you know, like communities get really tired of being tapped to engage in processes. So making sure that we're being respectful as a state, it's just a sort of high level thought.
Absolutely. Thank you for that suggestion. You know, since I came on board and with like the elections and things like that, it's been a little
It's crazy.
Chaotic trying to make connections with folks. But I plan to, you know, get back on it now that they, you know, when the dust settles a bit, and make those connections and collaborate more often.
And I might just add just to your, I think it's a really great point you're raising, in terms of the enterprise kind of engagement. Even before Erica was in her position, I don't know if y'all are tracking, but our governor established a racial justice council and required, you know, all agencies, as we go through our annual budget submission, which we're in the process of, to make sure that we have an engagement plan as part of that work. It really outlines how we're doing that in a meaningful way, more meaningful and more intentional than we have in the past. And I believe my sense is we're waiting to see what the Kotick administration wants in that space, but I imagine it'll be reinvigorated, that forum, and Erica is really our lead for that work and be engaged. And Contras was for a while when she was in that role, and I kind of was a little bit as well in between. But I think that'll be a great avenue and a great opportunity for us to get around the table with our sister agencies and share what we're doing and hopefully not only provide some benefit to them. One is like the equitable engagement program. I think is a great tool that others need to be using. To your point about making sure it's worth people's time, but then also I'm sure there's plenty of things that we can learn from others too out there that they're doing as well, incorporating our work. So anyway.
So I want to make sure, do we still have Paula? We just can't see her?
Yeah, she turned her camera
Still
on.
here, yes.
Okay, good. It occurs to me that, oh, sorry, I just,
Yeah,
the screen is not crystal clear and I have tired eyes today. So,
I'll keep my camera on.
no, you have to. I wanted to make sure we didn't lose you. And it just occurs to me that maybe you share the video with Ashto, if to the extent that you have some interest, maybe we can also share the toolkit. Anyway, just a thought.
Yes, I'm happy.
Sorry,
to
I
do that.
muted myself. That would be great. Erica, anything you want to show me? I'm always looking for good examples because quite frankly, ODOT is one of the states that has a better framework or a more robust framework than other states. Everybody's in this learning place and trying to develop some tools they can use. So thank you.
Of course. I will be in touch.
Great.
one thing I failed to share was my vision for the Office of Social Equity. I said what we were working on before I got here, but so since I've been here, I didn't understand why we had a separate Office of Social Equity and a separate Office of Civil Rights. And so beginning December 1st, I merged the two together to help us better capitalize on financial resources and our human resources. There were only 4 people in the Office of Social Equity, and that it's a huge body of work. And the Office of Civil Rights has about 17 people in it. And so bringing those skill sets together will help us capitalize better on the resources that we have and get the work done better and faster. So that's one goal of that process. I'm also doing an agency-wide training initiative, which is also a huge lift, and which means that I am traveling around to every region in the state and training them on social equity and the various components of it. And also doing one-on-one interviews with folks just to kind of see where they are and meet them there, and explain what equity is and how their day-to-day jobs relate to social equity, because that's a question that I hear a lot too. Like, how does this impact my job? And they don't realize that even snow removal, how we choose to remove snow, when and where, that's an equity issue, right? And so doing that. And then also just plugging away at the work that we are doing now. When I got here, the team was on the verge of burning out because they had been working so hard and so fast to get things done. And so I've extended some dates as to due dates or completion dates for things with the strategic action plan, just to give a little breathing room and understand that the workforce, needs time to kind of recharge. Doing equity work is hard, and it takes a lot out of a person. And so we need that time and space just to slow down just a bit so that we can do it right instead of doing it fast. Because when we do it fast, what happens is we have these great resources out there, but people don't know that they're available. And so I'm taking the time to do comprehensive rollouts of these things so that people know around the agency and externally that they're available and ready for people to use.
Sounds like really heavy lift and really like good intentional planning. So amazing work.
Thank you.
So have you made it over to Region 4 and 5 yet, Erica?
I actually work out of the Region 4 office every day. I live in Bend.
Oh, that's right. I knew
Yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
so I have not been to Region 5 yet, but I've been to 3 and 1. I've been everywhere except Region 5 so
Well,
far.
let me know when you plan, because I might try and go with you.
Okay, absolutely.
Because I think it's important work. Region 5 is Eastern Oregon, and it is a different world.
Don't they want to join Idaho?
Some of them want to, but not all. So, and we have a new Region 5 manager. And so just, I try to take to Region 5 when I can. And the last time I was out there was right before everything shut down in March of 2020. And so I really need to make the connection and meet Region 5 where they are.
Right.
Yeah.
I have met with the new Region 5 manager, and he is very interested in this work and how it applies. So I've been invited. I just haven't been able to find the time yet to make it. And now winter is upon us.
Yes.
So, but I will certainly let you know when I do make the trip.
Let's plan for spring.
Okay, that sounds great.
And just so you know, the OTC will be there in July out in Pendleton.
Oh, I think so.
We'll all be there.
So Erica, is there anything that you need or could use from this committee or kind of ODOT or OTC in general to help with your work? Are there things that we can be doing to support you?
You know, when you are out and about and people ask, what is ODOT doing around social equity? You know, now you know, so you can help spread the message and spread the word of what we are doing. I think people often remember the harm that ODOT has caused in the past, but we don't message well enough what we are doing and what we have accomplished. So helping to carry that message forward would be huge for us, and I'd really appreciate it.
Ted, do you have any input or questions?
Guess that's no.
I think he's muted.
Yeah, he muted himself. Oh, yeah, he can unmute himself. Ted, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sorry, I
Okay.
wasn't.
That's okay.
No, I think the program's very important and it's got to be put out in a method that can be accepted and people get on board and make it work. So I think, your job is really how do you sell it and how do you sell it in a manner that people really see the value in it. So doing it in that fashion and people can understand. So it's not something that's an added burden. It's a plus for us. So it's all sales.
Right, I agree. And I think a lot of what I am doing around the agency now is getting that buy-in. We've understood from the leadership level why this is important, but getting people at every level of the agency to understand why it's important and how it applies to them. And also just being very blunt and saying equity is not a race issue. Race issues can make people uncomfortable, but by saying equity is something that impacts the entire state of Oregon, regardless of what you look like, right? We care about how roads are maintained, how bridges are maintained in certain parts of the state. Sometimes we think we hear too much about the Portland metro area. All of that is those are equity issues. And so getting people to understand that is part of the salesmanship. And
I would add that federal highways and USDOT really call out rural communities in their equity definition.
Mhm.
So I think that's an important distinction as you're talking about it.
Right.
I have one more question. So
Sure.
I read a lot about what Secretary Buttigieg is doing at federal DOT around how to make the federal DOT how did you put it? It was like a tool for inclusion and equity as opposed to like division and racism. And I'm curious to know whether there's any benefit to ODOT in having stood this work up and be working on this. If there's a ability to access funding from federal DOT or work with them in any way.
So I actually met with them earlier this week.
Oh, cool.
And so yes, we are establishing that relationship, and I will be meeting with them regularly to see how we can partner and collaborate in this work.
That's so cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. If there are no other thoughts, comments, or questions, I can add some time back.
Sure.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, thank you.
Thanks very much. All right. Well, we seem to have more questions when we're all virtual. For time to. I guess, that's okay. Well, let's transition and let's hear from our new Chief Data Officer.
Thank you. So first, a little background. I've been here since the 28th of February this year. And prior to that, I was the Chief Data Officer for the state of Idaho. Prior to that, I spent, won't tell you how long, in private industry. 18 of those years were spent at a Chief Information Officer level. mainly in international, multinational organizations. I think I value that experience because it brings a unique perspective of the relationship between technology and data. One of the challenges I think everybody has, especially in business, is that we equate the two, and they're not the same. And they're managed differently, they're governed differently, and so it's an interesting dichotomy as we work through and talk with different parts of the organization. That when we say IT and when we say data, most people think we're talking the same, and we're really. I've spent the last 7 months basically doing a listening. And 2 reasons for that. Number one, this is a new position for the organization. We also created a new branch, a data solutions office. And so both came into being at the same time. And we had a huge opportunity to try and understand the situation that the whole organization has with respect to data. ODOT is kind of interesting in that, number one, it's very spread out. There are so many different moving pieces, different work being done, you know, from the labor of doing maintenance and building and construction, all the way up to stuff that Erica was talking about, and literally everything in between. And so part of the challenge is understanding with respect to what ODOT does, because there's so many things, what part does data play in the day-to-day, in the near term, in the long term, and as we look forward, maybe to the next decades, as ODOT matures, and as both the political and social environments change as well. So I learned a lot, and some of it was surprising. A lot of it was not, because frankly, ODOT is very similar to lots of other organizations when it comes to data. And I'm going to make a bold statement here that data perhaps represents the most powerful agent for change that exists in any organization.
That's the feel thing.
Yes.
That's real.
Yep. And the opportunity that ODOT has to capitalize on I'm going to use this word probably way too much, the massive amount of data assets the organization has built up over decades, millions of dollars of investment, hundreds of thousands of people hours engaged in either acquiring, creating, managing, utilizing data in all its forms and facets. In fact, I'm probably safe to say that everybody who works at ODOT interacts with data at least once, usually more, during the course of the day, especially if you're on a computer. Data no longer is just spreadsheets and database tables. Data are video files, Word documents, audio files, LiDAR, right? Maps, pretty much anything that we can use to represent information, transmit it, and then read, and then get the information out without losing meaning is data. Which means that the scope of what we're trying to do in our little data solutions office is massive.
How little is the data solutions office?
So on day one, there was one person.
When was day one?
February 28th.
Okay.
Within the first month, we had 2. By June 1st, we had taken the business intelligence and data warehouse team now over. So, so that gives us 3 more, one which was an open position process of hiring. And that's it. That's the whole thing.
How many did you just say? 5? 5?
So you said you had been surprised by something. What were you surprised by?
So I was surprised at a couple of things. I think the first thing that really caught my eye was the amount of what I would call mission important, mission critical data that are sitting in spreadsheets on people's desktops.
Oh, we have some energy here. Yes.
Tell me your first name again.
Mike.
Mike. So I'm so glad you said the Excel thing. So I have a really important question because I recently joined a team where, okay, I'll get to the point. So the question I have is, to what extent does your work include workflow process analysis for which you then analyze workflow business process analysis and tied to this technology solution as it relates to the data for which it's collected within that workflow?
I would say that is a major component of what we do and should be doing.
Yes, cool. Because the reason why I asked the question is because there are external technology solutions for which you can purchase that can both capture all the data, reduce the number of technologies, and be able to tell you how many days it takes for you to implement a change order. It can create, it can take the different project control folders, feed the data into it, that can tell you the overall cost in real time. And none of that exists today at ODOT.
So I'm going to go a little bit out on a limb here and tell you one of my biases. And that is that until an organization becomes less application centric and more data centric,
Right.
we'll never make the changes that we
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is often, and I see it almost on a daily basis, there's a use case need, right? Some specific use case that needs to be solved. And I bet you can't guess what the first question is that comes out of people's mind. What application or what software can I buy that will solve my problem?
Right.
Okay. That's being application centric. And applications, what they do basically, and you may have heard the term siloed data. So applications create silos. They make these kind of artificially protected asset groups that are very hard to interact with sideways because they're locked in these vertical silos. And so the more applications we see, the more separation we see of the data, and it becomes harder to share it. Where the sharing and the interaction and the interoperability of data is what brings the power and the value.
Exactly.
Right. So it's a cultural mind shift that to stop saying what software will solve my problem and focus on how can I use my data to answer my question. And that's a completely different approach. And I would say ultimately more valuable. Because the answers exist usually if we have the data in the data.
Right.
And plus, when we start throwing technology in the mix, now I'm not anti-technology. I told you I spent 18 years at CIAC. But technology has its place in an organization. And it's to enable the business to do what it does. The best that it can. The reality is data exists independent of application. Right? Applications come and go, but data stays. And data has existed before computers. It still exists without them. We just need them because the data has become so massive and continues to grow at such a rate that we can't keep up with it. So the technology is hugely important, how we use that technology is really important. But what we do with our data is really, I think, what the key to success. And bringing ODOT kind of into the 21st century with respect to those millions, perhaps billions of dollars worth of data assets that we have.
Can you give us an example of the use case and, the issue of solving it with application versus using your data? Just for those of us who aren't in this world.
Sorry. No, it's good.
No, and that's a great question because data means different things to different people. So I'll use something that I'm actually working on right now. I wish Matt were here because it pertains to his part of the organization. So earlier this year, the FHWA and the federal government changed the bridge inspection requirements for all bridges. Basically, they almost tripled the number of data points that have to be recorded in the inspection of a bridge, which is a fairly significant change. Currently, those data are collected, input, and then an annual report is generated using a specific piece of software. And the bridge inspection team has spent, and I'm telling you what I was told, okay, have spent 5 years doing workarounds because the software doesn't do what they really need to do.
Exactly.
Okay. So there's a cost involved. Every year we pay for the software, pay for the maintenance. These new requirements are going to make the software vendor have to update their software or create a brand new system, which is going to be a cost. We don't know what the end cost will be. We just know it'll be more than it is now. The software vendor has asked that each participating agency contribute $500,000 just to develop the software. Right?
Which they'll then charge us for.
Which they'll then charge.
Right.
So here's what I think is it's certainly more cost effective, but maybe even a more elegant solution. And that is, let's not use the software. Let's build a data repository where we can put these data in. We can manipulate them any way, form, or fashion that we want to, that the bridge team needs in order to do their work. And not be constrained because the software doesn't do the things that they need to do. Right. Over the course of the next 5 years, it's not best case, but probably a likely scenario is that if we were to do it that way, as opposed to invest in new software and the implementation of the software and the migration of the data into the new software platform, we'll save $500,000 to $1 million in the next couple. Now that takes into account that we have some people that can work on it, and we will have to invest in more cost-effective on the data side. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's helpful. That's a good example. Paul, you had your hand up, but now it's down.
I did, in kind of in a similar vein, Mike, you're starting a new office within a very spread, as you said, spread out agency that's steeped in tradition. Where do you start? I mean, you could chase the bridge inspection data, and that could consume probably all your time trying to figure that one thing out. Have you got an idea now of how you're going to approach from an agency-wide strategic approach to data management, like what you do first, second, and third?
We'd like to do it all first.
Of course.
But limited resources don't allow that. So I think there's 3 things that we have to keep forefront in our minds. And I think you mentioned one of them, that's a strategic plan. ODOT has a strategic business action plan that was approved in 2016. So it's 6 years old. There has been some progress made towards that. One of our tasks that are on our plate right now is to take a hard look at what that is and perhaps update or even rewrite it so that the strategic priorities for data are more in line with what the reality is in 2022 as opposed to 2016. We also need to, and I'm working with the state chief data officer on the state strategic plan as well. So we want to kind of marry those together so that we're supporting both the state initiatives and being able to strategically work with data and support data through, so that's number one. Number two is governance. Data really has two kind of broad headings. You've got to govern it and you've got to manage it. And you can't manage it without having governance. And you can't really govern unless you have the ability to manage. And governance informs management. So they kind of go hand in hand. Now, over the past couple of years, ODOT has worked towards developing and I'll call it nascent governance organization. It's still growing. We're still learning. And it's really been tied into technology governance and data governance hand in hand. I think that needs to be separated and that we focus on data governance as a strategic practice. And that is a lot of who has the rights to do what, what's the framework that we operate in, what standards and policies do we need, because consistency across our data is one of our weaknesses. One of the things I hear very frequently as I have gone around and continue to go around to different parts of the organization is I don't know what data there are and I don't trust them. I don't know that I can trust them, which causes a lot of work.
Is that like a historical that, over time, people have just decided that the data is inaccurate because one time they tried it 20 years ago and it didn't work, or is that, like, what is that?
So I think two things. So yes, probably past experience, you got some bad data, now I'm not going to trust anything, right? Because once you lose trust, it's really hard to get back. But the other part is Group A, who's trying to use Group B's data, doesn't know what Group B did to ensure the quality.
Not the methodology.
There's no consistent methodology. So where Group A says, well, this is what we do to ensure our quality, they don't know that Group B is doing the same thing, so they don't trust it. So the consistency question becomes very important with respect to governance. Because if I am going to your part of the organization and saying, look, I need this huge set of assets, I want to be able to trust it that you did the same things, the same processes, the same quality controls, and you documented them. So I could say, oh yeah, you did them all. I can trust your data. Now I don't have to spend 50 days qualifying and validating your data. I can just grab it.
Got it. Okay, so I just want to say I'm a geek. And so we do discrimination studies and disparity studies. So the fact that y'all are doing governance is absolutely dope because it will result in trust in the methodology. And I just want to put this out there from an external facing perspective, which is one thing that ODOT has good stories, but they lack the methodology for which to tell them. And so one thing that I care about with regard to ODOT is to help ODOT learn how to market itself, in which case it absolutely feeds into the governance conversation. So I'm only putting that out there for you to consider that as you're developing the framework for the governance. Because the other way I tend to think about data is the headlines for which the data outputs create. So anyways, I just offered that one piece of feedback and I just want to say I'm super stoked.
So I can talk for hours.
You have a half an hour.
But you brought up something that's I think is hugely important. And one of the really powerful things about data is it allows us to become data-informed decision makers.
Absolutely.
Right? We want to be evidence-based. The time has passed for decisions and programs and all these things that are happening that we do based on intuition and anecdotal narrative, right? Or emotion. If we have the data, we should use it. Problem is, and this is a key problem that we have at ODOT that I am literally taking personally because I think it has a huge value, is we have to make the data ready and quality and available when it's needed,
Yes,
not after it's needed.
yes.
But that requires a bunch of work because, and I was talking with Cooper yesterday and I used a cookie analogy. So let's think of data as ingredients for a cookie, right? The decision is the cookie. We have all sorts of different types of decisions though. But when you make a cookie, you go to the store and you buy flour that's already prepared. You buy sugar that's already prepared. Buy vanilla that's already prepared. What you don't do is go buy the wheat and mill it to create the flour and the sugar cane and extract the sugar or the vanilla. Or even for heaven's sake, roast the cocoa beans and extract the chocolate. But that's what we do most of the time, is we have this raw data, and when we have to make a cookie, we go, oh, I gotta mill the wheat. So we start and we do it all over and over and over. How much better would it be to say, I've got all these raw ingredients, let me get them ready, and you just come to the store and buy them. Now you're making cookies in an hour instead of 4 days.
How do you decide what ingredients you need?
I was just gonna ask.
So there's kind of an art and a science, I think. Questions. So let me divide analytics into 4 broad groups, right? Because when we think about using data, we think of kind of some standard things: reports, graphs, right? Any type of analytics charts that we see, maps, so visualizations. But those are things that we kind of do very well. So from an analytics perspective, I would call those, sorry, I have a note here, I actually wrote it down because I was hoping someone would ask the question. There it is, descriptive analytics. What happened or what is happening? And then you've got diagnostic, which is why did it happen? So they're 2 separate things. The descriptive doesn't tell you why, it just says something happened or happened. Usually it's in the past, right? These are hindsight data. And most organizations do those pretty well. Something happened or is happening. I'm trying to figure out what it is. I find out what it is. I find out what caused it. Now I'm going to fix it. That's kind of reactive. We want to move into being proactive. So that means that we need to be predictive, doing predictive analytics, and then prescriptive analytics. So predictive analytics are what could happen based on past trend. Okay. Prescriptive is really the powerful one because that's the one that gives us foresight. It's like, what should happen and what should we do? So, sorry, I went far afield from your question.
No, it's fine.
But the art in this is saying, what am I actually trying to figure out? Yeah. Okay. And part of data literacy is helping people to say, I have a business question or a business problem. How do I change that into a data question? And step number 1 is, what do I want to know? And do I have the data that could help me to know what it is? Now, I might not know that, so now I've got to go find. And that's part of the problem is we don't know where it's at. We don't even know if it exists at the time. And once we find it, we're not even sure what it means.
Data collection planning.
So this goes back to governance, where one of our, this has been on my list since I came to the state because it works so well in Idaho, is to create a data catalog.
Yep.
Find your data, describe what it means, track its lineage, ensure its quality. And when someone wants to know, hey, I need to know how many pedestrians were in auto accidents in 2021 on this road. I don't know where that data is, but if I went to my catalog, looked it up, I bet in 10 minutes, if my catalog was already built, my data is already quality controlled. I've got the sugar and the flour, I can start making my cookie. And if I'm missing data, that's when I can have those conversations to start to enrich and to curate the data that I wished I had, or to find data that exists in other parts of the organization that I can then bring in.
So, well, and Shauna, this ties to, remember when we first had this, remember when we had the conversation about the strategic plan, that this, if we knew that information around the catalog, we could we would be better informed about what the measures should be for this group, because we can cross-populate what is the data being collected so as to tie, for example, climate with other measures to create better outputs, and that ties to the marketing.
Well, and it ties to what Erica was talking about too.
Exactly.
Around social equity. One thing that I am struck by is that the work you're talking about, like, it is going to require a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
And having worked at, decades old bureaucratic institution, I'm curious to know what you're doing around the cultural shift and behavior change that needs to happen in order to execute the work you just articulated.
So we're very young. But some interesting things have happened in the last, I would say, 6 weeks. I've done a lot of talking all over the organization. In fact, Friday, I'm going to Region 4. On the 30th, I'm going to Region 5. So I'm now starting to get out to regions because I've learned something new every time I go. I also have a growing, my arms aren't long enough, list of opportunities that we have to actually look into, which is really exciting. But one of the, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Remind me your question.
Talking about culture shift.
Oh, culture shift, right. Interesting thing that's happened. So as I've talked, as I've met, and I've talked with everyone from Chris and the executive team, all the way down to people who are literally dabbling just because they're rich. Everything in between. Leaders, staff, execs, managers, everyone. And it's a fun thing to do. But what started to happen in the last couple of weeks is that, because I worry if people are hearing or listening. So in the last 6 weeks, I've had at least 4 different occasions where somebody has contacted me and said, hey, I talked to so-and-so who talked to so-and-so who heard you say this. Can you tell me more? Because I'm interested. And so I know at least a few people. And a few people are listening because it's coming back. Now, does that constitute a culture shift? No, it doesn't, but I think it starts to put the seeds in the ground for people to think, maybe there is a better way. Now, I also get concerned that people think this is something that's fast, and I'll echo what Erica said. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We can get some really big wins with some sprints, but the real value is going to be in doing this agency-wide, not just approaching use case specific. The value of data is in its use. So we have this massive amount of assets, a lot of them which are in spreadsheets. So we got to get them out of the spreadsheets. We have to have somewhere to put them. We've got to create architecture that allows people to get to them, to understand them, and that we can scale, right? Scale is a huge issue right now. Our data assets are pretty much locked up in the data center. The data center is limited by hardware. And it can only go so fast. So one of the things that I did in Idaho and in other companies is we've changed it so that we're not limited by physical infrastructure. It now becomes almost infinitely scalable depending on the needs of business. The business drives the process, not the technology. And the cool thing is 5 years ago, I wouldn't. But the technology now is mature, it's tested, it's proven, not 100% of it. But the parts that are now give us the opportunity to accept any data at any scale, at any speed, and make it available to the people who need it when they need it in the right format. And they don't have to wait for things. Now that's a huge vision. And our challenge is we're 5 people. And so we have some work to do. But also we have a whole bunch of people who are working with enterprise level assets that we have to kind of bring and get them to embrace the vision. And also to start investing not only with people, but with funding that we can get to put that architecture in place that makes it so we're not, that the sky's the limit, imagination is possible, and that we can become who we want to become.
Can I ask one last question? I'm sorry. Oh my God, it's so exciting. I'm sorry. Okay, so one other question is, and I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking the geeky question. So to what extent is ODOT inhibited by open source, and is it part of your other work also looking at other solutions like integrations or anything like that? Oh, you are, okay, cool.
So I'm going to put my CIO hat on here for a second. Part of the problem that large, very distributed organizations have is the autonomy that's external and a lot of the parts have, right?
Yeah.
And so what you get is this massive sprawl of technology where there's really no consistency.
Yeah, exactly.
And I keep going back to this consistency,
Yeah.
because consistency in process is important, but also consistency in tool.
Yes.
Instead of having to support 100 different applications, get 4 or 5 to do 98% of what you're doing.
Exactly.
And then focus on being successful with those. Find the few outliers that you need, but my guess is it's 5 or 10 people. Yeah. And then stop paying so much money for this massive sprawl and get your people to be experts in those really powerful tools that you have. And now you're optimizing people and you're optimizing costs.
And then I might just add a couple comments. Mike, I think, laid it out really well, and I would just take the opportunity to thank Mike for stepping in. He stepped into a huge role, a huge culture change, kind of the role that we're talking about at a time where we as an agency, we were talking about it yesterday, are in this hard space of constrained resources, and we've asked him to do this really big lift, and oh, by the way, define exactly how you do that. That's kind of the first step, and I would say from where I sit, Mike's done a really great job of taking these 9 months and going around and talking to the team, because we have data and scores of pockets all over the agency, and we have redundant data for all the reasons we talked about. People don't trust it, so they create their own. It's the same data in 4 or 5 places at a time. Nobody knows where it is. I think we as a kind of leadership team, you talked about governance, we have a governance model, but I think having his expertise come aboard and help us say it's not really adequate, right? We need to morph it is really helpful. I'd say from the kind of executive leadership perspective, I think we're on that there's probably going to be some structural changes as well. I mean, we talked a little bit about resources that need to happen. Probably going to be some consolidation, probably saying it intuitively. But Mike's been really deliberate. I really respect about analyzing if that's the right approach or not. and building those relationships with the team. So it's not a, we're doing things to you, but we got to figure out a better way. We've got opportunities here, and he's leading in that kind of, with that kind of approach that I think is really bearing fruit. And I'm confident that we are going to, with his leadership, come up with a better model. And there's so much opportunity for efficiency and cost savings. He talks about just one right there with the bridge piece. There's hundreds, if not more, applications that we're using like that, where we're just doing it because it's how we've always done it. And there's so much opportunity here, but it really is a long game. How are we going to stay with it long term? And I'm certainly hopeful that your leadership will study and help us steer that ship, because I think it's vitally important for this agency. And it's something that we just requires a great deal of intentionality that he's bringing in and his team is. And I'm hopeful that team will continue to kind of grow or more. But the other piece of that, I guess, is really we're a hierarchical organization too. And so at the end of the day, you have to have somebody that owns it and they can make those sort of decisions on the governance and other things. And that's again why I do think, through the revised governance or through the kind of consolidation, that's probably the model where we're going to have to go. It seems to me that's why we brought him on board, because he's talented in making those kind of decisions. And we want to make sure that he's able to do that. But it's a growth process to really get to that stage.
One thing I'd like to encourage is to keep track as you discover that we've got all these different kinds of technologies out there, and we're maintaining this many applications and how much that costs, to really track how much you save as you start migrating to this data lake idea, and break down those silos and the efficiencies you find in the organization, because I think that would be a really compelling story.
So let me just give you a little color around that. I agree, you have to measure, right? So I asked the question of the organization, how much do you spend? How much do we spend on data? Right? And I gave some guidelines.
Yeah.
What is the cost of your software annually? How many people are directly involved? What's your hardware, if you have special hardware? How many consultants have you engaged to work specifically on data? Right? I've spent 2.5 months and I've got like 5 answers, right? Because nobody knows, right? So this is data that we potentially could have. Right? How much money do we spend on data? Seems like a simple question. I think it'll take me a year to figure it out.
Well, and from honestly, Cooper, this one initiative will change the organization entirely, because this is one of the things I was starting to work on in my practice, which is it will force the removal of silos. It will result in cost efficiency, which may result in a decrease in FTE and a decrease in technology costs, and you get better outputs. All in one approach.
And to your other point too, I think it does. It's a huge. We're building a relationship and establishing these strong trust, right?
Exactly.
To Mike's point, we were talking about it yesterday. We'll ask simple questions, legislators, others, us, and it takes us forever if we ever get back with a straight answer, because we don't have the data to actually give the answer. And what does that breed? It breeds people saying, "What are you doing? Can we trust you about it?" As an agency, which breeds long-term funding ability to actually get what we need. All of those things. It really is critical.
I was at Portland General Electric. Before that, I was at Northwest Natural, and now I'm at Tesla. And I was just in a meeting yesterday with our data team. I've been really pushing us to share more and more information with utilities so that they can then, in response, take that information and invest in the resources. Anyway, and I'm on the charging team, and it's been really fascinating to me how sort of they take for granted this data, and how I keep saying just how incredibly robust it is, and how well organized it is, and how have these data scientists that understand it and understand how to, and it's so powerful. And that was not the case at Portland General Electric. So.
And I love that you said that, because and I think you said take it for granted. I'll go back to my cooking analogy. We take for granted how much manual effort goes into growing the wheat, milling the wheat, cleaning it, packaging and everything. We just pick it up. That's the way data should be.
Yeah.
Right? But we can't lose sight of the fact we have these raw ingredients, raw data that we have to invest our time and our effort. And we don't have to spend bucks on it, but there is some effort involved so that that package of flour is ready to go when. And so the organization that you're in now, if that's what they're doing, kudos to them, because that robust data, I'm jealous.
Leadership aside.
I'm geeking out. Well, I hope that gives you a flavor. Certainly, a couple hours more, you might get a really good picture, but times.
I would love, if it's okay, I don't know what kind of cadence makes sense for the work you're doing since it's a heavy lift, but like with Erica's work too, like having an update maybe twice a year would be really wonderful for this.
I'd love to.
Yeah, these two efforts are cutting edge for the organization, and that's really the role of this committee is to bring different perspectives from outside the agency to inform the work of cutting edge initiatives, and we kind of kept putting off these two presentations just to let these folks get their feet under them, knowing that there is just a lot of legwork. And I think, yeah, you know, you've almost had not quite a year under your belts and already doing great work. Yeah. So yeah, we'll put it on next month's agenda to when do we want to have a check-in again. And we'll reach out to Mike and to Erica and say, tell us the next time that you have something that you want to bring to us. Fabulous.
And I think as, just if I could add, Mike, when you have more examples of some DOT-centric kinds of solutions that you've come up with, I think those case studies would be really powerful for the rest of the employees in the agency who can then see themselves in using this sort of an approach. Might make it easier for you to explain. I mean, this is a whole new field, I think, for us in transportation, even though we've all collected data forever. You know, how do we best use it to make informed and good decisions? But the more people can see themselves in some of the things you've already marshaled and solved would be really helpful.
But that's like, so it strikes me, that's really similar to what Erica's been doing and getting out to the regions and like meeting people where they are, because like I'm imagining, I don't know this for a fact, but that she's finding, and you'd likely find too, like a real hesitancy to engage in some level because they're afraid of how it's going to change their everyday work. And what they do is what they've always done, and they're very comfortable with that. And it's not bad or wrong, it's just a human nature, right? So I'm interested to hear, like, again, back to that like cultural shift around the social equity work and that data work. I just
So my experience is kind of on both ends of the scale. I find people that are super psyched and people who are like, don't make me change what I want to do. There are very few of them. I think data is one of those polarizing things. Either yeah or no.
No, I know if my husband tries to teach me how to use like the microwave, I like go blank in my brain and I'm like, I can't go.
But Erica and I are already, we've had several conversations because one of the things on her end of the scale is data has an almost unprecedented ability to propagate bias. And so as we look at quality of our data, also have to look at are there biases baked in, either intentionally or unintentionally? And if they're there, I don't care in existing data, I don't really care how they got there. The fact is, can we identify them and not propagate it? But we also need to work with the organization, especially as they start new programs and projects and they're going to be creating data or acquiring new data. Are you thinking of what you're doing as process of getting these data with that equity lens? because some project leaders have to start thinking differently about how they set up those things. Because they've always done it the same way. I can't say whether there's bias or not. But if there is, we don't want it to continue. So I've appreciated Erica's partnership in that as we continue.
Well, so I literally just put a post out on that very thing today on my LinkedIn, which is, it has to do with the methodology, the collection method. In which case, I lost my thought, which was bias, around bias, but it was something. Oh, so anyways, this national organization, group of attorneys wrote an article about the bias in algorithms.
Mhm.
And so
Big thing right now.
exactly. So anyways, that's really cool. Yeah,
Well, and when we think about bias, often we go to DEI,
right.
right? Doesn't, in transportation doesn't necessarily need to be that, right? If somebody says, I checked maintenance status of all. Really, have you done all rural roads, or you've just taken a small subset and you're not including everybody? Right, so inclusivity, external of people and those types of things, I think.
Oh, I know what I was gonna say. So one thing that I heard you say was about emotions and so when we do disparity studies, which are studies of discrimination, and I work with economists to do that. So I just want to recommend that you also consider anecdotal evidence as part of your data collection method, specifically for Erica, because the courts have ruled that it is more powerful than actual quantitative data. And so anyways, that is an example of traditional models think of hard data as the standard of measure, and it's not always the case. And so in the case of discrimination, actually anecdotal evidence is more powerful than hard data. So anyways, something for you to think about.
And I look to them to help guide us in that.
Yeah, cool.
Because, and I'll be the first to say that there is anecdotal evidence that is very powerful. My comment about anecdotal evidence was about making decisions.
Yeah.
100% on anecdotal.
Yeah.
Or driven by.
So much of that in all organizations. Yeah.
Well, and just maybe to finish this off, I had a conversation about 4 months ago with part of the OregonDOT. And the folks that I was talking with, they were pretty frustrated about some of the things that they've been forced to do because they've had to do things manually. And one of the things about data is the ability to automate the mundane. Right? Use data to automate a lot of processes instead of doing all the things. So we were having this conversation, and just out of the blue, unscripted, unasked for, this gentleman says, he says, you know, it's so hard to find data and to figure out who has it and what it means, that we'll spend a couple of weeks doing it, then we throw up our hands in the air and we just make it based on it. Okay, well, that's pretty blunt. So it's the frustration factor really that got to it. So like I said, opportunities abound. I'm excited. I think we can really do some amazing and powerful.
Thank you. It was great to have everybody, not everybody in person, but having more people in person. And we missed you too, but thanks for being here virtually. And thank you, Mike, for very good.
I appreciate the time. I look forward to coming back and reporting some good things.
Were you in Idaho or you got here? How are you liking it?
I like it.
Are you trying to take the west side or the east side of the year?
So I saw that in the news a couple of weeks ago. It's like, I never heard of that. But you know, when I drive across the state, and I crossed from Idaho into Oregon. It looks the same until I get in the middle of the state.
It's like the gorge.
Yes. You got to Region 5, you tell them that, you'll have some instant street cred. Instant street cred. Okay. Thanks, everybody online.
Thank you. Thank you live.
Bye all.
I guess they're done. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Very nice, thank you for facilitating this.